What's up, Sales RXers? Look, with outbound conversion rate benchmarks being as low as 3%, it's no secret that it's really tough right now for a lot of sellers. And if you're an individual contributor or a senior leader in marketing, RevOps, sales, any role that has a revenue related metric that you have to attain, it's time to find a better pipeline channel. So, what's better than selling to someone who doesn't know you or your product? Selling to someone who does. This is where Champify comes in. Champify monitors key contacts at accounts like champions, post-sale sponsors, admins, heavy users, and they enrich that data to detect job changes, determine relevancy for outreach, and then assigns and alerts reps with those newly assigned leads. So if you haven't tried out Champify yet, you need to give it a shot. Stop spinning your wheels with outbound heavy sales motions and start selling to people you've already sold to. You can click the link below in the show description for an extended proof of concept and free data test from the team at Champify. What you'll do is click podcast in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Let them know that the Sales RX podcast sent you so they know who to give the VIP treatment to. Now let's jump into today's episode. Michael, I'm really excited to talk today, and the reason that I'm excited to talk to you today is because you come from this world of account management, customer support, customer success, account managers. How do we take the money that we're getting from our current customers, increase that amount of money, do a better job retaining those customers, and I'm sure you even have some insights probably on how you get referrals from those customers as well to increase your average amount of revenue per customer, lower customer acquisition costs, all those sorts of fun things. So I'm excited to have you today because that's what you do every single day. You're teaching companies how to do this. You're helping them facilitate that through the product at Callypso. And so I really want to open the floor to you. What is this essentially, this concept you have behind how you and your company are viewing what's called expansion sales and how you view account management through the lens of a sales process and how they can increase the amount of revenue and the retention of each customer and thus in turn lowering their customer acquisition costs.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. This is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. I have always been fascinated with post-sales, particularly post-sales revenue generation. How do you get more money from your existing customers after they initially become a customer? So it has been a fascination of mine ever since I got started off in sales over a decade ago. So I'm super excited to chat with you today about some of these topics. There isn't a company in the world that doesn't want to increase their revenue from their install base, but there are plenty of companies who struggle to do that. I think that there's a lot of problems in this space. In general, I think that companies really struggle with simply understanding how do I even identify opportunities for expansion with our install base, with our current customers. VPs of sales, VPs of account management, CEOs, even the board, they don't understand how to go about expansion sales because they aren't doing that first task of identifying potential opportunities for expansion. I also think that we create too many catch-all sales roles or catch-all support roles in companies where we expect people to do like a multitude of jobs without specialization, and the result of that is a not just less revenue, but a poor customer experience. I personally don't love it when someone's like helping me adopt a product and then also selling to me at the same time. I also think that account executives very frequently lose sight of how to grow expansion revenue. Usually it's for a multitude of reasons. One is because they don't always have the specialization, the coaching, training, and enablement. Their incentives usually aren't aligned. And because their incentives aren't aligned, they aren't spending on, most of the account executives I talk to are trying to get away from expansion sales, or they're not trying to spend as much attention there. And so the very first step that I think companies should take is really think about a full-time expansion sales role. NRR goes up, net revenue retention goes up when you have more than one person assigned to an account. Your retention goes up as well. If you lose a CSM, but you have, that continuity of sort of a person that they're paired with on your side of the business, that continuity enables you to have stronger relationships with your customer base. We talk about multi-threading on the customer side, but we need to be multi-threaded on our side as well. So I kind of have highlighted many different problems here, but the first biggest one is having a full-time dedicated expansion salesperson, ideally an account manager, dedicated to your book of business, or at least a part of your book of business. So that's essential step number one.
Now, once you've initiated that step, what is kind of step number two? How are you identifying the accounts that you should be targeting? Is it anything that's coming up for a QBR, a quarterly business review? Is it maybe someone that's got low sentiment, whether it's from NPS or maybe a customer support ticket? Like, what are some of the triggers of the ways you go? Like in sales, we have that all the time, right? Companies hiring. I sell sales training and coaching. Let's go talk to them about how they're going to support those people after onboarding. That's a huge trigger for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't approach the funding trigger because it's like, hey, they didn't go raise $25 million to go buy the sales doctor program. Maybe something in the future. So I'll put them in a special drip campaign to kind of warm them up. But like, what do you do in your world as step two? What's the triggering event to go, hey, this is someone that we should start having that conversation with or warming them up?
This is why I love having conversations like this, because I've had this flood of thoughts based on what you just said. Because on the sales side, we are looking for these constant triggers, and we're really good at picking them up. And then along with those triggers, we're really good at visibility, right? We have the tools to give you visibility. What is my salesperson doing all day? You can go and look. That same question that you pose to post sales is very hard to answer. And that is a major problem. We should be paying more attention to our current customers. And so the fact that we can't answer that visibility question that you just brought up, how we look at things in sales, there's also silos, right, between pre and post sales. There's all sorts of different problems. One of the other things that you brought up was triggers. So what are those triggers for pre-sales? Those reasons to reach out in prospecting. You have triggers in post-sales in very similar ways, but we aren't like identifying them and then laying them out like a play or a playbook even. So ideally what we should be doing with an expansion sale is getting way ahead. Is this user tracking how, what the mean or what the average is for all of our other users? Are they above or below pacing? How can we use our customer success team to drive that adoption? And then, oh, by the way, if they're, pacing above, how do we equip them to have that account manager step in at the right time, because we've done this exercise of identifying our plays, identifying our triggers, and then boom, our account manager reaches out at the right moment when that value has already been realized to then say, okay, we're doing one job for you. How can we do two jobs for you? How can we sell deeper into this account? How can we, get more usage out of you? What are other problems that we can solve in the business? And when we start looking at it just a little bit more granularly, to borrow some of the thinking that you just said in pre-sales and applying that to post-sales, we generate a lot more revenue from our existing customers as a result. It's better for the business. Quotas don't have to be so high for everybody. There's so many really healthy ramifications of this. It drives NRR, it drives net profitability. So it drives the average contract value of our book of business. There's so many really healthy things that come of this. The other question that you pose is like, what is that essential step two? And so the step two is identifying where is the room for potential expansion. And so you can like literally just start with mapping this out. You can do it in a spreadsheet. We have tools for it there, but the point is just to do it. And so For some companies, it's like, what are all the products you offer, and then listing out your portfolios, and just, have you done the exercise of seeing what they're using? Okay, well, we typically see when someone uses product A for 3 months that they then become, and they're tracking really well, that they then become a great candidate for product B. Oh, by the way, here's the message that we have done some of the work to templatize, but now we can start to personalize some of that to them as well. And we're reaching out precisely at the right moment because we know when that expansion cadence should happen. And so that's the level of thought that we need to have with first just literally mapping it out and identifying what are people using, what could they be using. Some people call this potential analysis, some people call it white space planning. But that essential number two step is white space, planning and identification, even before you even get to a QBR.
Yeah, that's so important. And I know it's heavy lifting and it's a lot of work, but I don't think enough companies do that. For me, it's simple and it's easier because I don't have like a slew of products in a software. But I know that if a company works with me on a skill boot camp, that they are prime and ready for a potential like workshop or in-person event, depending on where their company's at and what their goals are. But 4 to 6 months down the road, and so that's a trigger for me. It sets that up, and I have to map out like what is that what does that product look like in terms of usage. And I tell people all the time, we get people in with the skill boot camps, and then that typically will translate maybe into some consulting and then potentially an in-person. It's like that layer of adoption. If I can at least get your team together for 2 weeks, an hour a day, for 2 weeks straight, then I know that that level of adoption will lead into some potential, like what can I do at a bigger point for your company? And then more importantly, when you actually bring those people together, how can we make it full circle and all meet together and have a more impactful in-person type of event, which is great, but it's tough work. So I can imagine with companies that have tons of different products and different metrics and different scores and this and that, it can be really tough. But I think to your point, you have to do it, whether it's in a spreadsheet or whether you're using a tool like Callypso or something that offers the ability for people to streamline that.
Yeah, you bring up a point that reminds me of this study I heard about like a really long time ago, and it's like, if you ask someone to put a yard sign in their yard, the success rate is just like not that great. But if you go and knock on their door and say, "Hey, will you put this little sign in your window, this instead of a full yard sign?" They're like, "Okay." And then if you come back and ask them to put in a yard sign in their yard after they did the little ask, you're way more likely to have like a lot more success with that yard sign. But the problem in SaaS today is everyone is running around saying, "Hey, stick a yard sign in your yard." But sometimes these little asks, to your point, like if they use a little bit of one thing and then you're able to kind of cross sell them on something else, they become stickier. They say, "Who is Chet?" Right? And then now they're able to expand their use for you, use different products as well. And so sometimes, especially when it's way easier and way less expensive to spin up products. We're literally seeing products being spun up in days. So how we're acquiring those customers is really important. And that volume piece is important there. That conversion piece is really important at the top of the funnel. But then what do you do once you get that? You spend a bunch of time getting Google to buy you for $2,000 a month. Obviously, there's a ton of potential there for expansion. What are you doing to identify what the triggers are, and how to actually execute upon that expansion growth? And the good thing is I've seen a lot more companies, particularly this year. In challenging times, we're always forced to innovate a little bit, and so I've seen a lot of companies paying a lot more attention and particularly being more granular when it comes to expansion sales. And I think that that's really great to see.
Yeah, I agree. There, people are more interested in holding on to what they already have than going and trying to find more of it. There's just so much more value to people that are already. Why go find people that have no idea who we are, what we do, and how we can help when we already have people doing that? Obviously, you always need net new sales, but it's great to hold on to customers and just do better. And ultimately, I kind of have a hot take I want from you here.
Yeah.
Um, I've talked to a lot of companies who are having that focus on customer success right now, and they're actually more interested in getting sales training and expansion training for their customer success or account managers when they get into those conversations with customers. Now, big trigger of this is they're also experiencing high churn, but they're also finding that a lot of that really isn't to the economy. A lot of them are finding that they're losing people to competitors. I have a firm belief that that's because of the handoff between sales and account management, or what we would also call customer success. What are your thoughts on the process of handoff between sales and CS? And what is the biggest gap you typically see with teams in terms of that handoff that leads to high year one or even year two churn?
Yeah, I think there's lots of room for improvement. One, like when someone is buying your software, they're essentially, if you think of it as like hiring you to do a job, it like puts everything in context immediately. And like, what is that job that they are hiring you to do? You know, we talk about the jobs to be done framework. I talk about it all the time. I encourage people to check out the book by Anthony Ulwick. And so, if they're hiring you to do a job, from that, immediate moment of when the deal is closed, immediately we should have context all around like what that job is. And then we're measuring the milestones that map to those specific customer objectives. I had a chief customer officer recently tell me, this vendor keeps telling me I'm their best customer, and I'm telling them I'm not hitting my goals. And there's this huge gap between like what you see, if you look at everything as, um, just as product usage data. Product usage data is huge, and we should absolutely be paying attention to it. But we need to be paying attention to it in the context of the customer journey and the customer objectives. And if they're ultimately not hitting their objectives, that's a major problem. And so most of the gaps between handoffs between sales and post sales have something to do with this problem of like, what is the job that they hired us to do? We force people to repeat themselves. Our QBRs are all about us. We're not using mutual action plans. We don't have account plans. We're not account mapping. We're not white space planning. So the list goes on and on and on. And so we're essentially, one reason why doctors, I used to have a roommate as a doctor. One reason why doctors have such long hour shifts is to prevent this constant handoff of notes because of that problem. An account manager role helps you smooth out those edges there as well when you have a business person applied to the relationship and post sales as well. So I think you highlight a really important problem in terms of churn. The last thing I'll just say is like companies don't understand why they're losing, and they just kind of chalk it up to the economy. And I think like having a firm analysis in place that isn't biased as to like why are you winning and losing is absolutely important. And then there needs to be a really tight feedback loop put back into the company that is not just looking at numbers, but like what are the customers saying? Like, why are they actually churning? And so now we're getting in this space of where we're taking a lot of the concepts again, like in the coaching, the training, the enablement, the technology stack. And you're seeing a lot of those applications in post sales in order for us to keep our customers, but also to expand them as well.
Yeah. It's all great stuff, Michael. Also, just to piggyback on that, I do also think that buyers have a lot to do with that, because you're totally right on terms of what's the job that we're doing. And you use the doctor analogy. And I always encourage people, you just got to, like, as a buyer though, it's so tough because they want to get immediately to what's price, what's this, what's that. And it's like the doctor analogy again. Fortunately, a doctor who gives a diagnosis without examination is guilty of malpractice. And so unfortunately in sales, there's always this caveat too, where you do have those prospects, that those buyers that just want all the information. And then they're like, oh, I think this fits in my budget, but you're not really looking at the product and how it can achieve your objectives. And then you have salespeople who are just desperate to make sales right now. And then they close it and hand off to a CS rep who's like, oh my God, this is not a good use case.
Exactly. And going back to that doctor analogy, when you feel like a doctor is doing a good job, usually the first thing you're looking at is whether they listen to you. Are they kind? Are they compassionate? So yes, their training and everything is paramount, but also looking at these like softer qualities. becomes important as well. I know in my own experiences, like usually when I think a doctor is doing a good job, it's first that they listen and then that they prescribe. Whenever they jump straight into a prescription based on symptoms, I'm like, oh, they didn't really listen to me. And I think that is a big lesson for salespeople too. We get so overly prescriptive without first understanding the whole big problem, and then that can cause a lot of problems too.
Yeah. They're also okay with saying no. And that's,
Exactly.
if you have an HMO, you know that you get referred out all the time. So
exactly.
And we need to be okay saying no. I don't think this is right for us. There might be a better option.
Yeah.
I've had those situations. Yeah. Do I want a couple grand to do something? But I've told people before, I don't roll out of bed for less than 10 grand. And so if you're not looking at it this way, I mean, I can show you someone who will do it, for pennies on the dollar. I don't know what your results will be, but yeah, I got to be okay saying no. Michael, this has been awesome. Tell us a little bit as we wrap up about Callypso, what it does, and how it helps their buyers.
Yeah, absolutely. Callypso helps you identify and execute on expansion sales and account management. So we put everything in a single pane of glass for that account manager and just make their workflow and job much easier.
That's great. And if people want to connect with you or Callypso, what's the best way to do that?
They're happy to go to our website, or most people just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty responsive there.
Awesome. And we'll put links to Michael's profile as well as Callypso's website in the show notes below, and also access to the Sales RX community and the Sales Doctor and other ways you can engage with the podcast and our content. For those of you that are listening, we publish episodes every week on your favorite podcast platforms. So go like, follow, subscribe, rate, comment, whatever the hell podcasts are asking you to do these days. It's always changing. It used to just be go listen and follow. Now there's a billion different things because they want to become the new social platforms. But it makes sense when they're buying podcasts for $200 million why they would want to reinvent the wheel and make that investment pay dividends and become the single source of social media interaction. So thank you to all listeners, all the Sales RXers, first-time listeners and repeat listeners, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.